Um, Good morning. I'd like to introduce Keegan Curran. Keegan is a talented cybersecurity analyst and recent graduate of Bradley University. His passion for technology allows him to tackle diverse projects, develop his skills, constantly being curious to learn, and have fun while doing it, which is also important. From development to penetration testing, Keegan's experiences continue to grow his cybersecurity expertise and help contribute to a safer digital environment. Please welcome Keegan.
All right, so thank you everyone for coming to this talk. So just to give a little more background, I know the title's kind of vague and ominous. This is gonna be more of a show and tell type talk. This is on a actual security vulnerability that I reported earlier this year and has gone through the remediation and cleanup techniques. But wanted to go into a bit of background on how I find it because it was a surprisingly simple one, as well as the real world repercussions should a threat actor have found this one. So a little background on me again. My name is Keegan. I'm also known as Red Guy or K-Bots online, depending on whether you find me through my portfolio site or Discord. API exploits are one of my favorite things to poke around with, including this one. Prior to this, I've done a lot of small social media startup apps. Those are a gold mine for API exploits. Python is usually my go-to scripting language, and my other hobbies outside of hacking and cybersecurity are model railroading. I have a home lab at home, as well as some 3D printing. So, some backstory on this. On July of 2024, the fraternity I used to be a part of, and I'm now a house manager for, upgraded their fire alarm panel to a new fancy one that lets you download a mobile app on your phone, put it in test mode, add your lockbox combination, tons of super useful information that's great to have in the palm of your hand. Unfortunately, the app looked like this. And my first thought is, that looks heavily outdated and like it hasn't had any improvements in years. So I looked at the App Store for it. And the last update for features was a few years ago, and the last general bug fix update was 2 years ago, which, as anyone in security knows, if you're not putting out yearly bug fixes on an app, especially for something like this, there's a lot of room for bad things to go wrong. So I fired up one of my favorite tools, Fiddler Everywhere, set it up as a man-in-the-middle proxy with my phone, and took a look at the API queries. Any information you see unredacted is my own account, which has been rotated and cleared already, no one else's. But I saw in that post body there is just a site number query. And so from there, my first thought was, what if I change it? And it did. So looking a bit more at the kind of responses it gave a lot of information just in the account. It's very small, but don't worry. Next slide, I highlight what's important. So with every account there, the information we could get, let's see, does this have, yes, it does, great. We would get the addresses of the accounts, which especially for a fire, or especially the security alarm systems that this company also uses, is not great to be able to have, especially combined with, well, my fraternity didn't have one, this little tidbit of information there, the lockbox combination. So we were able to view any customer that had inputted a lockbox, or hey, here's just the code to our digital lock, the information that would then let you right in the front door with nothing else necessary. In addition to this, just some more of that site number information, region, things like that. Not as important. But the things you can edit are where things become even more dangerous. In addition to just viewing that information, this vulnerability carried over to all of the post, put, delete requests, and things like that. So things like the feature I mentioned where it's great. You can put your fire alarm in test mode. That means you can put anyone's fire alarm in test mode, anyone's security alarm in test mode, which basically tells the monitoring company, hey, if my alarm goes off, don't send anyone. It's just a test. It's nothing wrong. We also had a button, which goes the other way, of request immediate dispatch. And from talking with them, that is a, hey, we're not going to contact you, check with you, or anything. We are sending emergency services right now. So let's do some sandbox time. I talked to some of my friends and people I know in police and EMS to be like, hey, if someone exploited these, what could have happened? And we'll start looking at just Davenport, because I haven't really told you how many people are impacted by this yet. Just in the city of Davenport alone, there were 597 customers vulnerable to this app exploit. So the first scenario there, like I mentioned, that button there that lets us trigger send emergency services now. Imagine if the Davenport Fire Department got 597 calls within minutes of we need all hands on deck right now here. That would cripple the infrastructure and likely, especially from what I've talked to them with, obviously no way to prove it because something like this hasn't happened, a lot of mass panic. If you hear, hey, the EMS system is overloaded, you're not going to go out and check and see if all these places actually have emergencies. You're just going to assume, oh no, the sky is falling. But in addition to this, on the more petty theft and just kind of general chaos side, someone would be able to just trigger frequent false alarms, start lulling a business into a false sense of security of, hey, our alarm keeps going off, there must be something wrong. We're not going to go there and check on it, we're just going to click ignore because it's happened 10 times this week already. In addition to this, you know, like I said, the similar thing if you can also set off the alarm to have someone just clear the building. You want to get in, everyone's cleared out due to the fire, so take your time, peruse around, get whatever you're trying to do. Especially bad for things like critical infrastructures like hospitals, schools. One of the most interesting and slightly ironic customers that was in this was a city's digital forensics crime unit. But now let's look at the big scale. I've told you Davenport alone was about 597 customers. Let's take it a step farther. Let's look at the state of Iowa. 14,232 sites across Iowa. Then getting to not just the United States, but the entirety of North America and some of the surrounding territories, there was a total of 2,609,107 customers vulnerable to this exploit. And as I talked about earlier with that, it wasn't a very in-depth one. From downloading the app to finding out that I could view someone else's information was about 5 minutes of work, most of that setting up the proxy. Then the very fun, really big numbers. Let's look at, these are the top 10 states, the top 10 cities, and then lastly, the top 10 cities specifically with a lockbox. So you have things like Los Angeles, where you have 1,200 sites now where you have the keys. You have a way in. You have 23,000 that you can set the alarm off just in that one town alone. California, 357,000. And with this spreading to things like Canada, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, things like that, if someone were to use it to trigger alarms at all those places at once, it wouldn't just be an isolated impact on the emergency response infrastructure. It would be everywhere. The types of clients too. I had mentioned there's some things like hospitals, schools. There were looking at kind of some bigger picture, many large firms, many large e-customers, things like that. We're talking Fortune 50 companies that were vulnerable to this issue. Critical infrastructure, things like power plants, data centers, from very small coal-fired to large nuclear facilities. In addition to this, public sector, courthouses, police stations, things like that, water treatment plants, and the ones that are really the most personal product and person danger, things like those residential addresses, because especially someone who would be on a service like this as a residential is probably the elderly or those that are, sick, need in-home care, and that extra level of support. So then looking at the timeline, after reporting a few vulnerabilities, I've had some companies that will go and get things fixed within a week or a few days, and it's great. I've had some that months later still haven't fixed an issue that's giving me access to a bunch of people's information. This one did pretty good other than a few small things. So on 7/24, I reported the vulnerability to the company. It was great. I had to go through a local organization because this company had no official bug bounty program. But with the scale and potential impact of something like this, I wanted to make sure at least some effort was put into making sure it got to someone who could do something about this. On 7/26, I actually had written up a formal report, explained a bit more what I did to get there, how they could fix it, what was wrong. On 7/29, I noticed that the application was offline. They took not just this app, but every single similar application that this company was running offline. So that means that customer impact likely was even larger than just what I found through this one mobile app. And then sometime around August 16th-ish, this is where the fun comes in. I believe around the date they brought the application online. I've worked with our local vendor that contracts them out to confirm it is fixed. But this large-scale company, their response to me fixing this was just deleting my account. So working with the local company to make sure we can still monitor our fire panel. And I know this was kind of a semi-shorter talk, wanted to still cover it, thought it'd be interesting. If you'd like to connect or ask questions later, that's my LinkedIn, Discord, email, and my website. The email being star@kbots.tech, as I have forwarding set up so you can send whatever you want at kbots.tech and it'll get to me. It was rapid response monitoring services. So they're a very niche to their industry, that this is what they do, which kind of makes the fact that it was that type of issue even bigger. I'm hoping that as a result of this, they've started beefing up their security, actually getting a proper security team and things like that, because from what I understand, their response when my local business reached out to rapid response, their response was more of a, well, how'd you find this? No one's going to find that. It doesn't matter at first. So especially when some of their customers are government organizations and things like that, that's not a great response from a company to give. And then now plenty of time if anyone has questions, comments, things like that. Yes. I use Fiddler everywhere. It's similar. It's very similar to something like Burp Suite. It is just a paid license one. I'd call it the Apple of proxies. It looks a little prettier. Yes, it was a mobile app, and it was just a regular, typical HTTPI. It wasn't any GraphQL or something like that, but just a regular GET PUT request type API. And it was just altering the body that let me find this. All right. With that, if there's no other questions, I'll hang around a bit longer if anyone wants to just discuss more privately or up close. Thank you, guys.